Once upon a time in a faraway land, there was a little girl named Alara who lived with her grandmother in a tiny cottage nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake. Once upon a time in a faraway land, there was a little girl named Alara who lived with her grandmother in a tiny cottage nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake. Alara had a heart full of dreams and a spirit of adventure, but she also had a secret. She was afraid of the dark. Every evening when the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness would envelop the cottage, and Alara's fears would come alive. Shadows seemed to dance menacingly, and the creaking of the old house sounded like whispers in the night. For years she had relied on her grandmother to chase away the darkness, both literally with a flickering oil lamp, and metaphorically with tales of bravery and light. But one day a sudden storm struck the land, and the wind howled so fiercely that it extinguished their precious lamp. As the darkness deepened, Alara felt a surge of panic. Without the lamp, the shadows seemed to grow, taking on monstrous shapes. Fear threatened to consume her, paralyzing her with its icy grip. Then, as if sensing her granddaughter's terror, her grandmother stepped forward. Her wrinkled face, usually so full of warmth and kindness, was now etched with a determined set. Kneeling beside Alara, she began to weave a new tale. Once upon a time, she began, her voice strong and unwavering. There was a young adventurer named Leo who embarked on a quest to find the legendary starfire, a magical flame said to banish all darkness. Intrigued, Alara leaned closer, and her grandmother continued. Leo ventured through shadowy forests and across treacherous mountains, facing his fears at every turn. He encountered the shadow beast, a creature born from fear itself, which tried to devour his courage. But Leo refused to let fear win, confronted the beast, not with weapons or spells, but with the light of his inner strength. And as he banished the shadows, the beast recoiled, revealing the source of its power, a crystal of pure darkness. Alara listened, captivated by the story, as her grandmother's voice painted vivid pictures in her mind. She saw Leo battling not just external monsters, but internal ones, too, conquering his doubts and insecurities. Her grandmother continued, with the crystal in hand, Leo returned home. Not as a timid adventurer, but as a beacon of light. He shared the starfire with his people, dispelling their fears and illuminating their path forward. As the final embers of the oil lamp flickered and died, leaving them in total darkness, Alara's grandmother concluded the tale. And so, my dear Alara, even in the darkest of times, the bravest thing you can do is to confront your fears and let your inner light shine through. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the relentless pounding of the rain. But as the first rays of sunlight peeked through the clouds, chasing away the darkness, Alara felt a shift within her. Her grandmother's story had planted a seed of courage in her heart, a determination to no longer let fear dictate her life. She rose, her eyes shining with newfound resolve. "I want to find the starfire," she declared, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. Her grandmother, her lips curving into a proud smile, nodded her approval. So began Alara's journey. With a knapsack filled with provisions and her grandmother's blessing warming her heart, she ventured into the world beyond their cottage. The forest, once a place of joy and wonder, now loomed before her like a menacing giant. Its branches gnarled and twisted in the darkness. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig sent shivers down her spine. But with every step, Leo's story echoed in her ears, bolstering her resolve. As the day wore on, the forest seemed to test her spirit. Thorny bushes tore at her clothes, and the ground, wet and muddy, made her small legs heavy. Yet Alara pressed on, her determination fueled by the belief that she was not just conquering the forest, she was conquering her own inner demons. Then suddenly the trees parted, revealing a clearing bathed in an ethereal glow. In the center stood a majestic oak, its branches reaching towards the sky like supplicating arms. The star, summoned, the center. Surrender. Ilara gasped, her heart pounding. As she approached, the stone seemed to hum with power, and she knew instinctively that this was the source of Leo's legendary flame. But as she reached out to touch it, a deep voice boomed, "Who dares disturb the slumber of the ancient oak?" Startled, Ilara whirled around to see a figure emerging from behind the tree. Tall and imposing, with eyes that glinted like chips of ice, he radiated an air of authority. I'm sorry," Ilara stammered, fear momentarily overwhelming her. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to gather some firewood." The man's gaze, sharp and penetrating, seemed to see right through her. "Firewood," he echoed, his voice laced with skepticism. "Is that what brings you to this sacred grove? Or are you here for the starfire?" Ilara hesitated, torn between fear and honesty. Then, remembering her grandmother's tales of bravery, she lifted her chin. "I am here for the starfire," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "To help chase away the darkness." A flicker of something akin to surprise crossed the man's face, quickly replaced by a grim expression. "The starfire is not for the taking," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "It demands a test of character, a display of courage worthy of legend." Undeterred, Ilara stepped forward. "I am not afraid," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I have faced my fears, and I am ready to do whatever it takes to obtain the starfire." A slow smile spread across the man's face, his eyes twinkling with admiration. "Very well," he said, his voice now warm and inviting. "Let us begin your test." And so began Ilara's trials. The man who introduced himself as the Grove Keeper tested her patience, her strength, and her spirit. He set before her tasks that seemed impossible. Yet with each challenge, Ilara demonstrated not just physical prowess, but mental fortitude and an unwavering determination. Through it all, she remembered Leo's journey, his battles against the shadow beast, and his triumph over fear. His story became her anchor, guiding her through the rough seas of doubt and uncertainty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Grove Keeper stood before her, his face grave. "Your courage is commendable, child," he said, "but the final test remains. To obtain the starfire, you must confront the shadow beast, the embodiment of your deepest fears." "Are you still willing to proceed?" Ilara hesitated. This was the ultimate test, a battle not just for the starfire, but for her own peace of mind. But looking into the Grove Keeper's kind eyes, she knew she couldn't back down now. "I am ready," she whispered, her voice filled with newfound strength. And so the Grove Keeper led her to the heart of the forest, where a swirling vortex of darkness pulsed ominously. This was the shadow beast's lair. Taking a deep breath, Ilara stepped into the swirling vortex. As she descended deeper into the darkness, her fears took shape, manifesting as shadowy figures that lunged and snarled. But instead of cowering, Ilara stood firm. She had faced her fears in the real world. How could she not conquer them here? With a determined cry, she charged forward. The battle that ensued was fierce. Shadow figures attacked relentlessly, testing her resolve. But with each strike they landed, Ilara's spirit grew stronger, her determination to overcome her fears burning brighter than any darkness. Finally, as the last shadow dissipated, Ilara found herself in a small, dark chamber. In the center sat a crystal of pure darkness, pulsing with the same energy as the vortex. This was the source of the shadow beast's power. As Ilara approached, the crystal began to glow, revealing a woman whose form seemed to shift and flicker like a candle flame in the wind. The woman turned, and Ilara gasped. It was her. But in this vision, fear had consumed her, twisting her into a creature of darkness. "Ilara," the woman whispered, her voice echoing with despair, "you have come to defeat me." "But why? I am just a manifestation of your own fears. Can't you see?" Ilara shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't want to fight you. I want to help you." Reaching out, she touched the crystal, and in that instant, everything shifted. The dark chamber vanished, replaced by her grandmother's loving face. "Ilara," her grandmother whispered, her voice filled with relief and pride, "you have found the starfire. Take it back to the cottage. The people need its light." Wiping away her tears, Ilara nodded, clutching the glowing crystal close. As she raced back through the forest, the crystal pulsed warmly in her hands. banishing the shadows and filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. When she returned to the cottage, the storm had passed and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds. With trembling hands, she placed the starfire on her grandmother's table. And as it ignited, bathing the room in its warm glow, her grandmother embraced her, whispering, "You were always braver than you believed, my darling. Just needed to remember." And so Alara learned that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not in the outside world, but within our own hearts. The starfire became a beacon of hope for her village, chasing away not just the darkness, but also the shadows of fear that had long plagued them.